The storm did not merely fall over High Mesquite Valley that night. It descended like molten iron. Rain hammered the earth until the desert itself seemed to groan beneath the weight of it, thunder cracking so close it rattled bone and thought alike. Lightning split the sky in violent seams, revealing the valley in sharp, unforgiving flashes, mesquite trees bent low, arroyos flooding, the land stripped bare and shuddering under the assault. Jonah Hale reined in his horse when he spotted the wagon. It lay overturned in the mud, one wheel shattered like a broken bone, steam rising where rain met hot iron. The mule was gone. So was any sign of shelter. And then he saw her. She knelt beside a motionless body half covered by a torn canvas tarp. An Apache woman. Alone. Her braids hung heavy with rain, unraveling at the ends, her hands trembling as if the storm had reached inside her and torn something loose. She did not look up at first. She simply stayed there, pressed to grief, as though refusing to let the world move on without her consent. When she finally lifted her face, lightning carved her sorrow into something Jonah would never forget. "I'm all alone now," she whispered. The words were thin, nearly lost to the rain, but they struck Jonah harder than thunder ever could. For a man who had spent years outrunning his own ghosts, that single sentence cracked something deep inside him. Every instinct told him to ride on, to keep moving, to leave sorrow where he found it. But instead, he swung down from his horse, boots sinking into mud, because something older than fear had taken hold. Dawn crept over High Mesquite Valley like a reluctant mercy. Pale silver light dragged itself across the soaked desert, as if the storm had scraped every color from the land. Mesquite branches still dripped, smelling of wet smoke and clay. Mud clung to Jonah's boots as he stepped away from the ruined wagon, the cold morning air slicing through the lingering heat of the night before. A coyote cried somewhere beyond the low ridges. Its voice was thin, mournful, like it understood death had passed through here and left something unfinished. This stretch of Arizona territory had always lived between worlds. Ranchers pushing fences outward. Drifters moving with cattle seasons. Apache families who had known the land long before ownership was measured in deeds and wire. Folks spoke softly when certain names were mentioned. Folks judged loudly when people didn't look like them. That truth hung in the valley like dust that never quite settled. Sahale stood a little apart from Jonah now, her silhouette framed by a bruised pink sky. Her buckskin dress clung to her legs, darkened by rain and dirt. Her long black hair, once neatly braided, fell in damp strands around her shoulders. Even caked in mud and grief, she carried herself with quiet dignity. Chin lifted. Spine unbroken. Her eyes were dark and watchful, flickering with something Jonah couldn't name. Strength, perhaps. Defiance. Or simply a heart refusing to collapse, even after the world had taken everything. The storm hadn't softened her. It had revealed her. Jonah told himself not to look too often. Still, his gaze kept finding her. He noticed the small piece of hammered iron clutched in her left hand, worn smooth at the edges, held like a talisman. He didn't ask about it. The desert taught a man when silence was the kinder choice. He adjusted his coat, feeling the familiar pull of the old scar along his ribs, a wound earned on a night he never spoke of. Years of drifting from ranch to ranch had carved him into lean muscle, built by long rides, bad weather, and work done without complaint. His beard shadowed a face marked by tired eyes, the kind that hadn't slept well in years. People always said the same thing when they met him. Jonah Hale looked like a man who stayed only as long as he needed to, then moved on before the world asked anything of him. But this morning, something in him felt less certain. Smoke rose from the wagon's broken lantern, mixing with the sharp scent of iron. Above them, the clouds parted just enough for sunlight to slip through, casting a muted glow on two figures standing in the wreckage, one cowboy with nowhere to belong, and one woman whose world had been washed away in a single night. Jonah cleared his throat, not trusting his voice. Sahale didn't look at him, but he could see her breath tremble in the cold air. They were strangers bound by storm, by death, and by a silence neither of them knew how to break. And yet, as the valley opened beneath the lifting sky, Jonah felt something shift inside him, like a door easing open, letting in a sliver of light he wasn't ready for. The wind gnawed at the valley long after the storm passed, scraping across the flats as Jonah led Sahale toward a line shack nestled against a low ridge. His horse snorted uneasily with every gust that rattled the yucca stalks. Puddles glimmered on the horizon, reflecting a washed-out sky, but the chill in the air warned Jonah the night would turn cruel once the sun dropped. No one survived alone out here. Not a cowboy. And certainly not a grieving Apache woman who had lost her father, her shelter, and her horse in one blow. The shack came into view, roof sagging like an old man's shoulders. Jonah pushed the door open, hinges groaning, and stepped aside. Sahale hesitated before entering. Inside, dust rose in a tired sigh. The place smelled of old wood, forgotten coffee, and the echo of men long gone. She stood just inside the doorway, eyes sweeping the room with the caution of someone taught never to assume safety. "You can take the cot," Jonah said quietly. "Floor's dry enough for me." She didn't answer. Only watched him. Jonah struck a match, coaxing a weak flame into the stove. The glow softened the room, shadows retreating just a little. "Turn away," she murmured. He did without question. He listened to the soft sounds of wet buckskin peeled from skin, fabric wrung out, the fire cracking behind him. Only when she said, "You may look," did he turn. She was wrapped in an old wool blanket now, hair darkening the fabric. The iron talisman rested in her hand, thumb tracing its edge again and again. "It'll warm soon," Jonah said, gesturing to the stove. "It is enough," she replied. Silence settled between them. Deep, pressing, but not hostile. Jonah sat near the door, rubbing his hands. Sahale sat on the cot, knees drawn close, grief held tight but contained. Finally, he spoke. "Storm like that don't come often." "Not luck," she said softly. "What then?" She hesitated. "My father said the land chooses who survives it." Jonah nodded. He believed her. Later, when he told her she didn't have to speak her truth again that night, something eased in her expression, only for a moment. Outside, the wind circled the shack. Inside, two strangers shared uneasy peace. Neither knew it yet, but this was the first turn of the road that would bind their lives together. Cross Creek Ranch rose from the valley like a promise. Weathered fences. A low barn darkened by years of sun. A wide porch where Martha Cross hung laundry that snapped like white flags in the breeze. When Jonah and Sahale arrived, the storm clouds had moved on, leaving the land washed and quiet. Martha stepped out first, eyes widening at the sight of Sahale's exhaustion, but her voice held only warmth. "Come in, child." Ephraim Cross followed, clapping Jonah on the arm without questions. "Plenty of room." The simplicity of the welcome disarmed Sahale more than anything else. Days passed. Sahale worked quietly beside Martha. Jonah repaired fences with Ephraim. Glances were exchanged. Words were few. Trust grew slowly. One afternoon, Jonah found Sahale calming an injured colt behind the barn. "It is not touch," she said softly. "It is trust." That evening, their fingers brushed as she handed him coffee on the porch. Something settled between them. Not love. Not yet. But the beginning of choice. Summer heat arrived heavy and relentless. Jonah felt the shift before the danger showed its face. Sheriff Josiah Cook arrived coated in dust. "Maddox is back," he said quietly. Asking after an Apache woman traveling with a cowboy. Fear tightened Jonah's chest, not for himself, but at the thought of Sahale gone. "I won't run," she said. Lightning flickered far off. That night, hoofbeats came slow and deliberate. Jonah stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. You hand her over, Maddox called, voice slick with threat. You'll get her over my dead body, Jonah answered. Thunder rolled. Gunfire erupted. Rain slashed sideways. And in that moment, between storm and choice, Jonah knew he was no longer running. Whatever happened next, he would stand. For her. For the land. For the man he was finally choosing to become.